Hi, and welcome to your introduction to the Unit 3 or AP 503. This is an introduction to the short answer questions for working collaboratively with healthcare professionals guide. As with previous SAQ papers, you'll be starting to understand by now that there is a minimum pass mark for the whole paper, as well as minimum pass marks for each individual question. But even if you only get the minimum pass marks on every single question, it will not give you enough to pass overall. So your marks are going to be awarded by your marker, and they will take into consideration certain aspects. Things like the content, how you've applied your theory knowledge, your research and understanding of what you've found out, and how you've applied that into your own content text. Your presentation with regards to your formatting of your assignment and your level of academic writing skills, and taking into consideration referencing. And as I've said before, referencing is not compulsory for the SAQs, but it is something that you want to demonstrate as part of your higher order thinking skills for your marker to take into consideration. So to pass this paper, there is actually only 5 questions, so it's the shortest out of all the SAQs, and each question is going to be out of 10. So you have a maximum of 50 marks, and to get the minimum pass mark of 65%, you have to be awarded 33 points over those 5 questions. So if you ever want to think about how do I know if I'm going to get the right amount or what if I'm roughly aiming for, you can obviously do the 5 questions. 33 divided over 5 would give you your answer with regards to how many should I get as a minimum on each question. And you can do that with previous papers also. Take the maximum amount of questions there is and divide that by the minimum mark. Remember, your word counts are a guide, so try and stay on target, but don't get too distracted by a word count if it means that you might get an extra point. So with question 1, it's using a familiar command verb of evaluating. So you should be used to writing an evaluation with regards to a subject that is given you. Remember, we're talking about the positives and negatives to your answer. How do you feel about the research that you found? What are your personal opinions? Is there any relevance to your current practice? So for this question, and this whole unit is looking at sort of working within the industry. So you've got to evaluate the value of effective communication within aesthetic practice. So make sure it's always put back to the aesthetic practice. So evaluate the value of effective communication within an aesthetic practice and the potential consequences of poor communication. So we're looking at the positives and negatives of communication and what can happen in either aspect. So communication is key to any business, but communication allows for basically a thing of like exchanging ideas. So you can have team meetings where you can exchange ideas. They can be one-to-one meetings. Communication as well between your clients and the practitioner can allow for continuity of care, making sure that with follow-up appointments that they speak to the same person so that there's a story that can be tracked back. Professional opinions and knowledge can also be shared through effective communication. And also thinking about the best treatment plans for your clients and communicating to them, because that's often where there is a big mistake happen. And obviously explain to them that it's not a one treatment wonder, how regular they need to have the treatments, the possible downtime. So communication can work within that and working out the best and the safest treatment plan for them. Think about all methods of communication. So communication isn't just verbal, there is written communication. Things can be made judgment on how nice a price list looks, a poster, a social media post. Think about things that you might have looked at, or social media posts where there's spelling and grammar errors, formatting errors, you can't really see what's been written, or obviously communication where there's so many filters over the top, it can be obvious, and again, that can be unethical and can put people off. Other things that can be taken into consideration of communication is your body language. Someone walking in and you're not giving them a smile or acknowledgement or feeling being reassured, that will actually come across negative, as well as the way you dress, your visible appearance. If you don't look professional, if you look scruffy or dirty or not what your possible clients might be expecting when they walk in the door, that can put people off immediately as well. So communication isn't just verbal, it's the non-verbal as well. So make sure you don't miss that out on your assignments. Remember, you can refer back to your own positive and negative experiences, as well as things that you use in your own practice. Also, this might have highlighted some things that you never realized as an effective communication with regards to price lists and fonts, and that certain people can't read certain fonts and certain colors. So that can be quite sort of a good point to put into your assignment to show your own personal growth. So there is so much resources out there to do with communication and effective communication within a business. What I would say is when you're trying to look it up, try and make sure that whatever business you're looking into, try and link it always back to the aesthetic practice, because that's what the question is asking you. So try to stay on brief, but you will find thousands of resources to use on effective communication. Just make sure what you are looking at, you can sort of think is not Wikipedia, that it is a reliable resource that you can sort of refer back to as method of your understanding for this question. So your marking criteria is no different to all previous ones, where you've got marks out of 10. If you only get 3 marks, that is a fail for that question. You will be provided feedback on how to and where to improve and think about expanding on your knowledge. What you've got to remember, these are level 5 and above qualifications. So you do have to apply your own research methods and apply yourself. You are not going to be given the answers on a PowerPoint. That's just not how higher qualifications work. You need to make sure that you are putting in the time and the research, because they're the skills that are developing you for a long-term career. So your minimum pass mark for this question, if you've just done a summary, a basic simplified sort of talking about effective communication within aesthetic practice and the potential of poor communication in a summary, so a simplified bullet pointed type response, you're going to get 4 to 5 marks. And if you think about it, if you only get 5 marks on 5 questions, that's only 25 points, which is not going to give you a pass for your whole assignment. So really you want to be looking at the next category along. So you've got to demonstrate and interpret the value of effective communication. So why is it so important? And also the potential consequences of when that goes wrong. And show sort of transparent research of the subject. So how do you show research? By quoting and referencing. 8 to 10 marks, you have evaluated in a lot more detail and the potential consequences, and then talked about the value of how it makes for an effective business and a positive experience for your clients. So now with question 2, we're starting to look at doing an analysis. So we need to look at all the factors into sort of what this question is asking for you, and what are the consequences again, negatives and positives, and what could influence your opinions around the facts. Again, linked to your own practice. So question 2 is, do an analysis or analyze the factors that have an impact on the quality of your communication within a team. So thinking about how good your quality is in your team, or if it's bad, how's it got that bad and what could be done about it? So again, positives and negatives. So now we're starting to look at teamwork makes the dream work. So you've got to think about potentially if you're a manager, or if that's your hope one day that your business is so large that you're going to have to hire people, you've got to look at how communication and how it affects a team. So good practice would be to sort of talk about poor communication, how it can obviously limit collaboration. It can also mean that if you're not sort of stressing health and safety policies and your procedures within your business, how it could lead to patient safety or client safety being put at risk as well. Also, think about things like communication and things that can have an impact within a team. So it's quite sort of interesting when I researched my own assignment, like age can have an effect on communication. Certain of the younger generations can struggle with phone communication and face-to-face and verbal. They actually prefer to communicate through text messages and emails. Whereas if you flip that and you look at an older generation, they prefer to phone up and speak to a person. So age can be a contributing factor. Sensitive information, so thinking about how you communicate that within your team. Should you be discussing a client's sort of needs in front of everybody, or is it on a need to know basis? Making sure that when you get given information that it's passed on or actioned within a timely fashion. So making sure that things aren't delayed or forgot about, or if it's gone on for so long that it just makes other people angry, and it can also affect sort of a smooth running business. Another thing to think about is some of the barriers to communication. So you could have strong accents or language barriers that can actually make it quite hard for people to understand other people. Also, you've got to think about any people with disabilities. So it could be people that have hard hearing or are deaf. It could be hard to communicate verbally, so they're going to rely heavily on the visual cues they're getting. Or obviously you can flip that if someone has poor eyesight, and thinking about how you can effectively communicate. Also, even communication with other people that cannot read or have problems with learning disabilities, and sort of lengthy, long sort of disclaimers or pieces of paper that they have to fill in. Maybe it's best to go through it verbally so they know what they're agreeing and signing to. So they're things to can take into consideration, and you can start to mention things like ethics as well. I'm not going to highlight places to get research on communication because there are thousands, thousands and thousands, and you can often draw on your own knowledge as well. Just make sure that you don't fall down a rabbit hole, and try and keep things specific to the aesthetic industry so that you can stay on brief. So the marking criteria for question 2 is no different to any of the other marking criteria. It's out of 10. A basic summary of things that can have an impact on the quality of communication is going to give you minimal marks. Going into a little bit more of a description and giving valid examples is going to give you the next stage up. And obviously talking about the negatives, if not addressed effectively, is going to push your grades even higher. So again, question 3, we're still analysing as well. So you should be used to starting to work within that analysing sort of structure of writing. Question 3 is you're going to analyse effective strategies, so effective ways for even preventing poor communication in the first place, managing methods of communication, and when it doesn't go right, how do you resolve the conflict within your team? So again, this might be something that you can sort of look at your own examples, as well as thinking about if you are going to work in a team, how do you prevent your team falling apart? Within any team, there's always going to be problems. There's always going to be differences in opinion, and obviously it's this difference in opinion that can lead to conflict within the team, and that can actually infect a whole team, because you then sort of feel like people are going to pick side with one person over another, and it can get very bitchy and very out of hand very quick, and make a very sort of toxic environment for anybody to work in. So you, in this assignment, you can think about discussing some simple strategies to reduce this. And this is actually called conflict resolution, and it's something that should be part of a leadership and management training, or if you've ever done any management, it's something that you should be very familiar with, because you want to avoid the conflict in the first place, but you'll also got to make sure that you're not stupid enough to think that everyone's going to be happy all the time, but that you can start to think about how can I resolve conflict if and when it occurs. You can discuss things like team meetings, individual meetings. You can look at staff surveys. You can even think about who you hire, making sure that the person that you introduce into your team is not going to have a negative sort of impact on your business, especially if you've got a really good team. Sometimes you might find corporate days, team building days. They're a great way to sort of resolve any conflict that may have happened or a way of preventing it in the first place. So individual and team meetings are a great way for you to listen to individuals about how they're feeling. Also, it's a great way of people coming together, sharing good ideas, and maybe even resolving conflicts within themselves. So it's a great way of people to talk about their happiness at work in individual ones. And obviously, again, if everybody's happy to work somewhere, then it's going to make your business even more successful. Also, if you are attempting to be a manager or thinking about you are the person at the top, you've got to be proactive in actually helping resolve these matters really quickly. Leaving any situation unresolved is going to lead to unhappy sort of staff. If you've got unhappy staff, that will start to rub off onto your clients, and then that's going to have a negative effect on your business. So it's important that you are aware of ways you can prevent problems happening, but if problems happen, how can I prevent them from having a real negative impact in my business? Again, you might have already seen and got all these resources from your previous questions that you can use. Another good thing to look at is terms like Googling things like conflict, workplace conflict, resolving workplace conflict, conflict resolution in the workplace. They're all good keywords to start to look at to gather some information on as well. So as usual, your marking criteria is out of 10. So your minimum pass marks are 4, but as previously stated, if you got 4 on every question, you wouldn't pass. So you want to be looking at getting sort of in that 6 for every question mark. That would take you just over the threshold for passing. So you've got to think about sort of outlining some effective strategies for preventing and managing and resolving your conflicts that could be in your team. So strategies means you've got to write out sort of effective ways to prevent or deal with and resolve conflict within your team. And that's just for your basics. To go on to the higher levels, you've got to do all of that, but in a little bit more description, and also how sort of you should implement it. So how do I resolve conflict? Staff meetings, getting people in, talking, whatever method you find in research, that's what you've got to talk about. And then also for the 8 to 10 marks, you've got to do all of that, but with detail, and obviously the consequences if not addressed and how it can affect your aesthetic practice. Try and link it back to there also at every point in your question. So question 4 of 5, we're back to evaluating. So we're evaluating the principles of the Equality Act and their impact on the aesthetic practice. So again, the Equality Act isn't something new just for aesthetics, it's something for every workplace, but you can start to have a look at the evidence sort of to think about with regards to your clients and your staff, and ensuring that you are providing somewhere where everybody is treated equally and no one is treated unfairly. And you can look at the positives and negatives from a client point of view as well as a staff point of view. So things to think about in your answer. There are 9 principles to the Equality Act. So this is from the Equality and Human Rights Commission. So the 9 principles within the Act itself are age, disability, gender and gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, your race, religion or belief, sex and sexual orientation. So these are the 9 principles. So you can obviously break down these 9 principles and talk about them a little bit more. So again, you can think about that, you can't employ someone the age of 18 really to work in aesthetics because of the way the Child's Act is, or the Children Act is. You can't do treatments on somebody who's under 18. You can't target anyone that's under 18. Thinking about when you're looking for a member of staff, you can't sort of stipulate that you only want a male member of staff or a female member of staff. You can't discriminate against somebody who sort of their gender that they are sort of identifying as, again, who they're married, which religion they follow, or if they don't follow any religion, again, they can't be turned away from that. Things though that you've got to think about is as well, we can turn someone away because of their age, because if they're legally not able to have the treatments, then we're not discriminating against because of their age. We are excluding them because legally they can't have the treatment. The same with someone's skin colouring. If they are not suitable to have laser because they've got a higher Fitzpatrick, or they are more at risk from having certain treatments because of their Fitzpatrick, then you are not discriminating against them. You are excluding them under the grounds of health and safety, which does trump obviously the Equalities Act, because health and safety is important. You must make sure that sort of, equality in the workplace, it does thinking about sort of, have it enable staff as well, treating everyone equally to have access to the right training opportunities, and obviously builds a nice, happy, harmonious, diverse work environment so that everyone has the potential of working somewhere in the best place possible, and everyone's happy, including your clients and your staff. You must make sure that if you are a manager of somewhere, that you've got a written equal opportunities policy that everyone can see, and also you should have one as like a written equal opportunities for even your clients. Some people like to have that on their website, a bit like terms and conditions, but that you've got everyone being fairly sort of treated, even down to the point where a lot of places, when you sort of pick a premises, that you've got disabled access, you've got sort of a toilet big enough for them to be able to use, things like that as well. Another thing to think about is unconscious bias. So I often sort of, people where unconsciously, even to the point where I used to think about putting images on PowerPoints and for advertising and things like that, you would often not realize that you were putting pictures up of all of women, not of men. You weren't diversing your skin colouring as well as your genders on your advertising and your promotional information. So it's important to even think about the unconscious bias that people have, and it's not a conscious decision to just have female pictures and female staff. It just happens out of an unconscious bias, which is a more modern term to look at. So it's a way of obviously discussing that and bringing that into your arguments, positives and negatives as well. So again, many thousands of research out there. Just try and make sure that it's always about the UK so it doesn't sort of get confusing. Things you can look at as the Citizen Advice Bureau, government policies. Again, some of the references you may have used prior may have information in there as well. But try and make sure that it's always reputable. So again, marking criteria, you've got to make sure that you've got a level of detail that warrants a pass. So you need to make sure that you either summarised for your basics on what are the principles of the Equality and Diversity, or moving on to your Equality Act and giving it a bit more of effectiveness and outline within your business. And to get the higher marks, talking about how you judge their effectiveness within aesthetic practice. So we're up to question 5 now, last one, and we're back to evaluating still. So this time we're still looking at that Equality Act, but we're starting to think about how you can implement the principles. So we've talked about the principles in the first one, those 9 key principles, but how can you act on those principles to ensure that you are sort of implementing and following them within aesthetic practice? And as you can see, it's always furthering on from previous research methods. So your references will probably be similar references throughout the whole of your SAQ. Your marking criteria does not change from each question, so it's still out of 10. So you've got to evaluate how implementing the principles of the Equality Act can help your aesthetic practice. Remember, we're always got to bring it back to aesthetics. That's the key point, that you don't go off and disappear into a different rabbit hole. So make sure that you're talking about how it can be implemented. Giving examples will give you the higher grades, and obviously the referencing is where you can show the examples are from. You should be well practiced at understanding this marking criteria from now. So again, this is who's going to be implementing them. You're going to be looking at your leadership. So having strong leadership is going to be essential to ensure that people are following the equality and diversity in the workplace. And obviously it gives people a point of call if they feel they're being treated unfairly, or they see someone else being treated unfairly. And then that leadership of the people that are to then act upon this information to ensure that people are making sure that they're following it, or obviously getting rid of the bad apples. Make sure as well, from a client point of view as well, you've got a clear and published complaints procedure so that it is followed and people can see the steps that they have to take so that everyone is treated fairly and equally. As I said, advertising and the use of social media as well. Making sure that when you're advertising, you're thinking about your audience and the diversity of your audience. So basically, all in conclusion, promoting a sort of a more inclusive aesthetics clinic is going to benefit everyone, staff and clients. You're creating a nice, positive, law-abiding environment that makes everyone feel respected and face no discrimination within regards to the Equality Act. So there's quite a lot to think about for this assignment, but it's starting to sort of make you realise maybe some of your own practice, there could be unconscious bias, or that you could start to promote a little bit more on your conflict resolving, as well as your advertising. And again, big term, if you're eventually going to be wanting to run a business and where more than one person of yourself is going to work there, what you might need to do. So make sure that when you submit this assignment that you are looking at that double spacing and your font you're using and word counts, and re-look over some of your previous submissions as well. Every time you do an assignment, you're going to start to build on your knowledge and start to find the formula that works for you. So good luck.